We are live. No comments? Great. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Anise.
I'm Gerald.
I'm Andy.
Okay, and this week we read Cat Person by Kristen Roupenian. Roupenian? Roupenian. Anyway, um, if you haven't read the story, go read it and come back. A lot of people probably already have read the story. It's the most read story ever in the New Yorker, which is pretty exciting. So in Cat Person, Margot, a 20-year-old sophomore in college, meets Robert, an older man. They meet at what is the older man? People immediately think like 40s, 50s, mid 30s. They meet at an art house theater where Margot works. Though initially unimpressed by Robert, after some texting over the holiday break, Margot develops a crush on him. When she returns, they go on one bad date that ends with the two in Robert's house. The sex is as bad as the date, and afterwards, Margot frets over how to end the relationship. Eventually, she does with the help of her roommate, Tamara. Robert seems respectful of the decision at first, but later, when he sees Margot at a bar, he sends her abusive and derogatory texts. All right.
Abusive and derogatory.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it.
Yeah, something many women could have seen coming from a mile away. So, Andy, what did you think of the story overall?
I don't know. This is going to be a common refrain where it's one of those things where like, oh wow, what a good story, and reading it made me feel bad, and I was talking about it and just like, oh, some readers of the story, perhaps readers of the female persuasion, might also, in addition to feeling bad, had some sense of catharsis. But that catharsis was not available to me from my perspective in this story. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's real good.
Yeah, the catharsis is like, that's exactly what happens many, not always, but many times.
Yeah, I think my feelings were very much alongside Andy's, but actually changed slightly when I realised it was written around the time of the start of the Me Too movement. So I think it had particular resonance with women at that time because, you know, it hadn't the treatment of women by men hadn't been talked about much, or hadn't been talked about in a big way before that. And so this whole sort of treatment of one human being by another human being is getting called out. And I think now, even though it's just a few years later, I think it's now a little bit, I don't want to say passe, but I think it tells a story of the time, and I think it's very relevant for the time. And I think now probably I don't know, it seems a bit old now.
Yeah, it's funny how in just a few years things have moved very quickly. But again, you have to also remember we're in a very particular demographic. We consume a lot of media. We're very plugged in and we're very online. So to us, this feels like old. Like this already went viral. Not just this story, but stories like this conversation, this discourse happened. But there's people who aren't as plugged into the discourse for whom would still feel fresh. So I feel like I sometimes have to check myself where it's like, that was 2 years ago. It's old news. And it's like, okay, but I'm like one of the most online people I know. So I think that's part of it. But also, this is zeroing in on a very particular. So with Me Too, there was a lot of focus on sexual assault, harassment, in particularly the workplace, but really everywhere, and how that affects women's careers, the expectations, all that kind of stuff. But this one was a little bit, or power dynamic things in general, even if it didn't escalate quite to the point of like a whole sexual assault, just the way that a power dynamic can make things questionable. But in this case, it's really about just how, and there was some of this during Me Too, but it wasn't as much of the focus, even though it did get some light, was this sort of like, even just sort of dating, especially when the woman's a lot younger, there's all these weird areas where it very quickly just doesn't feel right. Even if, like, in this story, I don't think we would go as far as saying it was rape, right? It's like, you know, Robert could have done better, but he didn't like violate. Like, it wasn't like an assault, right? But it still feels uneasy. There's still this like thing here where it's like, something isn't lining up, and it feels just a bit gross. And then I also see Margot thinking the way she thinks about it, talks about it, and it's like, man, there's so many. Like I remember so many conversations, especially in my early to mid 20s, where it's like, even earlier on during the texting phase, where it's like, he sent this or he acted in this way when they're on the date, and it's like, oh, he's being a bit quiet. And at first, she's like worried about it. What could this mean? And then by the end, it's like, oh, it's because I hurt his feelings when that kind of thing. The like reading into every little thing and then creating a narrative to make it sort of work. It's because, oh, he's intimidated by the fact that I'm educated. Like the narcissism that comes into that reading it to create a narrative that kind of like makes you feel better in that moment. God, I have been dragged into so many of those conversations with friends, especially in my 20s. It was just like, this is the most true thing I've ever seen about how women with very little information just like craft this narrative. And then it's like, yeah, that was very true. But yeah. All of that.
I think I think you're right. I think that his behaviour, I don't think was intentionally bad. I think he just was very introspective, very self-centered, had no idea about her feelings and what she wanted. Yes, when they went out for drinks, and then she decided she wanted to go back to his place. You know, she was a willing participant. She wanted to do that, despite having misgivings about him and about his, you know, his behavior, the way he kissed and this sort of thing. So I think, I think it was sort of very subtly done because I think we can all imagine how women might fall into that situation. And she wasn't a shy virgin. She had sexual experiences before. So I think it was good to make sure that was pointed out, that she, you know, he wasn't taking advantage of her because she'd never done it before. But also the fact that after she decided to drop him or to not see him anymore, the way that escalated, and the fact he came back into a bar and saw her with her friends, and it just showed how that nasty side, how easily that people can fall into that and show that side of them. So she did well to get out. I like her mate who sent him a text saying, no, not interested.
Yeah, that part felt very true too. Like women in general being like, oh, I have to take care of this person's feelings as I'm breaking up with them, even if it was like one date. But then the person who's not in the hot seat, everyone is capable of being Tamara. When it's not your breakup, when it's not the person that you were on the date with, everyone's like, oh, I'm the fiery, tough, sassy one that can send the text. But I'm sure Tamara can't do it when she's the one doing the breakup. Like, yeah, that is also very true. Yeah. Yeah. And so even sort of quiet over there.
This.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. It's honestly, I don't know about like he was shitty. He was just shitty, and you're allowed to date shitty guys for as long as you want to date them. But like that doesn't make him any less shitty. He was always shitty. He wasn't bad. It's an example of shittiness that sort of creeps in sideways.
He sort of did like what I noticed right away from the beginning is his flirting style was negging.
Right.
Like,
he's shitty, but like if shitty isn't actively violent, it doesn't always register.
Right. Yeah. Oh, people who don't know who negging is, because again, we're very online, but like it's like when you pepper in some criticisms to the person you're flirting with so that they need to feel like they need to impress you. It's like the first thing he says to her is, oh, you managed not to insult me this time, right? And like there's a way that could not be negging, but there's later in the story it keeps coming up where like she sometimes felt like she needed to impress him or make him like feel better about certain things. It's just that it's like putting someone on the back foot, so they need to make themselves better in your eyes. It's negging.
That's called negging, is it? N-E-G-G?
Negging. Yeah.
It's like egging, but negative.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Pegging is positive.
Correct,
Something
Neil.
else
That's
entirely.
very correct.
Something else entirely, I know that one.
Okay, cool. Well,
This brings us back to the royal family again, but anyway, let's not
what is going on? Okay.
weird. Sorry.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah. Also, okay, so that Gerald found the article in Slate. It's an essay by a woman who identifies herself as Margot. The author, Kristen Roupenian, she was a grad at University of Michigan when she went to get her MFA, and it sounds like she secondhand kind of heard about this story in a distant way. We don't know how much she actually heard it firsthand from who Robert is supposed to be, but Robert's a grad student at U of M. There's a real Robert and there's a real Margot, and the real Margot finds out about this when the story goes viral. She emails Kristen about it. They have a call, whatever. Okay, so that essay, obviously written by the real Margot, is very focused on, how she feels about having a lot of her biographical details still in there, like that she worked at the theater and that the first date was at the multiplex. All that kind of stuff was real. What she says isn't real necessarily is the bad sex part of it, or the derogatory abusive text at the end. The first half felt real, the second half less so. And and then it's about how reading it through the story, it's changed the way that she sees the relationship with this big 15-year age gap. And, now she's like, was there something off about it? Was he being a creep? She didn't think of it, him as a creep at the time. The real Robert is now dead. So it's, he passed away young. So it seems, there's like no sort of closure there. But the thing that I was thinking about while reading this essay, knowing now it's based on real people, is the real Robert read this story wherein he is portrayed as disgusting from the go, and awful at sex and an awful kisser. And I'm here like, that must have, oh God. The real Robert could have also written an essay. Like, what is this assumption that I'm absolutely disgusting physically? God.
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it? When characters are identifiable, because then as a fiction author, when you create characteristics, or when you exaggerate characteristics for the story, people say, "I'm not like that. How dare you?" There is that danger, and I think I wouldn't have used the same location. I'd have transposed it somewhere else, but
Yeah.
hey, I haven't gone viral, so what do I know?
Yeah, I mean, the author, I think, did fictionalize it enough where she isn't just writing someone else's story. Like, I think she heard some points. It made her think about this large age gap. She didn't know the real Margot, but like she was saying, even without knowing me, she wrote some really she was really accurate in what I was thinking at the time, like where we would hang out and why, where I would want to go on a date and why. Those things are also things that just existing in this space, also a grad student, also in college, also a woman, those experiences are a bit shared. So there's some blurring between Kristen's experiences, the real Margot's experiences, and then the second half seems entirely fictionalized.
Yeah, it's the whole of his behavior all the way through is just off, and as you say, that first, the second time they met, you managed not to insult me this time, is just a bit off, and you think that's not a very nice thing to say. It's and then it just continues and escalates from there.
Yeah. You have to really know your audience before you make a joke like that. Even with someone you've known for a long time, there's certain people who wouldn't react well to that. Like,
yeah. And I think by telling that through the written word, you lose any gestures or any facial tics or responses which might have made it acceptable in the situation, but just taken out of context and just presented as words, you just think, no, that is off. And it may have been that the effect was less intentional.
We also don't know a lot about Robert at all. We don't know what he does. We don't even know, like, I think, like, what, just the whole thing, like, we can make assumptions, like, why is he interested in a 20-year-old compared to him kid? Okay, just typical youth fetishization, college girl. It could just be that. Maybe there's something we don't know. We don't know anything about his internal world. So we just sort of default into assumptions that are not favorable for Robert as well, which I think was smart. Like, everyone goes, we know why the 35-year-old guy is trying to sleep with a 20-year-old, right? But it doesn't mean that all 35-year-old guys do, right? So, like, there's these assumptions we're making that is, helping and paint him in a light.
Yeah, and the fact that he wasn't very considerate towards her helped build our version of his backstory, and bring us the thought that maybe he's had very few emotional romantic experiences with women, and maybe no one's ever told him that this is not what you do. This is not how you talk or behave.
Andy, are you just over there feeling shitty?
Yeah, kind of. I don't know. It's a story about a not cool dude. He seems pretty not cool.
Yeah, I think the story is more about Margot.
Yeah.
Because she's twisting herself throughout the story, trying to figure out a narrative that makes her feel like more protected or sought after. Sometimes her narcissism comes into play. Like, when does the sex get hot? When she's like, well, I'm probably like the hottest thing he's ever slept with, right? Like this, right? Like, there's these other things that just also felt very true. Even if it's not really what she wanted, that gets sublimated for all these other reasons. Yeah. And then at the end, the guy who gets rejected calls her a whore, which sounds about right.
Yeah, and getting what he saw wrong, and instantly accusing her of going out with him or fucking him.
Yeah. She sees a male friend in the same space as her. Yeah.
Gerald said the F word.
I did. Sorry.
It's okay. We already said pegging. So
that just means positive negging.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
No Googling. So but there was a clue that he was kind of possessive and controlling during when she went home for winter break, and he's like, the whole time it was very hard for me because I kept thinking about how, like, you could reconnect with an old boyfriend from high school, which, one, you're 35 years old, so that's already if those are your concerns, you might be dating the wrong person. And yeah, just that possessive controlling aspect of it.
Yeah.
And he kept, like, negging her, right? Like, for living in a dorm. She's a 20-year-old sophomore in college. Again, if these things are bothering you.
Yeah. It's kind of strange that, in a way, this, we've sort of summed it up, haven't we? And there's not a lot more to say. It's a well-written story, and I think it's of its time, and I think it does what it's set out to do. And I think the fact that many people can identify with Margot in that situation, and that's probably what made it go viral at the time. Probably, it did a good job in that, I think.
Oh, one more moment just to call it that felt really real is when they're at the bar and he shows up, and it's not a bar he normally frequents, and they're like, oh my God, he's here. And then she describes all her friends surrounding her like she's the president and they're the Secret Service and they're shuttling out. Also very real.
They know. They know
Yeah.
he's not the right person for her.
Yeah, but even just like the wall of people
Yeah.
and they move with you. Yeah. Real. Yep.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
I don't really have more to say. It's very accurate, well written. It's good.
Yeah, I don't think it can help that it made Andy feel shitty.
Yeah. I mean, but like, I don't. It's not the story's fault. That's
No, it didn't set out to do
men's fault.
Men's
As a
fault,
boy
yes.
dad, you can have your son read this and then say, "Hey, listen,
Yeah.
listen. You see this guy?
You see how
Do nothing
shitty
he
is?
did. Yeah,
Right.
you see how shitty he is?
Yes.
Do
Don't
none
be
of
that
these
guy.
things."
That's
Yeah.
that's a useful tool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And girl dads can be like, "Hey, you see when a guy is giving you all these red flags? You see all these red
Yes.
flags?
Go.
Run."
Yeah.
Like,
Fast
yeah.
as you can.
Actually, I
Change your
remember when I
phone.
was a teen, my dad warned me against negging before that word really existed, like before, without using that term. Like, just basically, if there's like anyone, whoever makes you feel like you're not enough, like you're not good enough, cut them immediately. Like,
Wow.
and it did help protect me from that. Like, I remember I would detect that immediately and I would like hear my dad. I'm like, oh, that's right. This is the worst kind of person. And the other thing is like anyone who like makes you feel like you're competing with another woman or like you could potentially be like a backup or something, out. No. Yeah.
Wow. Yes.
He's like, those are the worst. Yeah. I remember my dad telling me this when I was like a teen and it stayed with me.
Yeah. Well done, Dad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I think, and I think as a lot of decent parents would do that now, and say, you know, that I noticed there's a lot of impetus in supporting children and saying, you know, you can be who you want to be, but just be content with who you are, and you're as good as anyone else, and all this sort of stuff, this sort of positive reinforcement stuff.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah. But his more specifically was any guy who's doing that is playing a
Yeah.
game and they don't really care about you. Like he was very specific about that aspect of it. That's a game. That's a tactic. No. Oh, okay. Cool.
There you go.
Now I know the game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well done.
Also, you can be whoever you want to be unless you want to be Robert. Then
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Don't be Robert.
don't
Don't
be
be
Robert.
that guy.
And honestly, don't be Margot either. Be a bit tougher than Margot. Be a bit more self-assured. You know, Margot a little bit like wound up here because she was creating this fantasy, not listening to her better instincts. And it's like, you know, part of that's learning. She's only 20, so maybe it's never avoidable for a 20-year-old. But maybe we can help some 20-year-olds be like, hey, don't ignore the things that don't sit well. Don't create fantasies making excuses for someone who has done nothing to earn that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of strange because she's had boyfriends before. She's not inexperienced. So so I think it would have been easy for the writer to sort of fall into that trap of saying, oh, there's this, you know, pale virgin who knows nothing about men, but she's clearly got a lot of friends. She's had boyfriends before, so I think it's good to show that even when you're not completely inexperienced, that this sort of thing can happen if you're not careful.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's some women who only date Roberts, and then they don't, and they're like, it never works out. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. No, yeah. There's some people who don't learn the lesson on both sides or all sides. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. There's someone I watch on YouTube who's always calling other people out for being narcissists. And you think
that's the number one tell of a narcissist.
Yeah.
That's the number one. They always diagnose everyone around them.
And why you? Why do you always attract these people?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
It's quite good fun.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, numbers now.
Yeah, ratings.
I think I'm going to go 4 and no, I'm going to go 5. I'm going to go 5. Of its time, it was very good.
Yep, I'm also giving it a 5.
I'm gonna give it a 4
Okay.
because part of our rating is, what we
Personal
enjoyed.
feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. Indeed.
I don't know.
This must be one of the quietest Andy episodes ever.
I know.
Well, because I like fully support all of its method and ideology, and it's well written, and I'm glad it exists. But like, just unpleasant.
There's
Yeah,
no
that
magic.
wasn't-
There's no sci-fi.
My comment wasn't a criticism at all. Of course, it was
Yeah.
just an observation.
Well, I guess also because I specifically support the ideology, and like that's an important thing to write about. Because it's the thing. Robert's the type of character where people will initially be like, "Oh, he didn't do anything bad. We should defend Robert."
Yeah.
Like, no, he did. He's kind of the worst, even though he didn't.
Yeah. For the people who do defend Robert, and there are people who do defend Robert, the only thing that they could maybe say is, well, she didn't clearly communicate. There's a lot of reasons why she didn't clearly communicate. She was thinking things, keeping it from him, acting another way. That part's true. But also, Robert knew he was drunk and knew that she was drunk and vocalized that. So Robert was also trying to get what he could get. All right. So, like, sure, she didn't clearly communicate that she no longer wanted to do this. But one, that could be dangerous, depending. I don't think this author would have gone in that direction. And I don't think Robert would have assaulted her because that completely changes the story and the point you're trying to make. But in the real world, you never know. Could be. And part 2, there's a lot of reasons why 20-year-olds don't, which is why a 35-year-old shouldn't date a 20-year-old to begin with and then take her home when she is drunk. So, like, sure, she can communicate, but Robert also was in a gray area the whole time and kind of knew it.
Yeah.
He did know it. So.
Well, I mean, a little bit. That's why I want to say, Anais, is he was not in a gray area. He was awful. Did he perform a violent act? No, I would not say he performed a violent act, but he wasn't in a gray area. He was a terrible, terrible person.
Yeah, he's like right. Like,
yeah.
Going for the 20-year-old to begin with. Like, here's the thing with age. This comes up when there's like celebrity age gaps. There's always discourse around it, and there's always these two sides. Where one, it's like one where we're saying, believe women, adult women, they're in charge of their lives, they make decisions. So then we can't automatically assume that every single age gap relationship is because of some older man in some way being predatory to a younger woman who doesn't have as much experience as him, who he's trying to like mold in a particular way because she's young and inexperienced. Because then that removes all agency from an adult woman, right? So there's that part of it where it's like there's a tension here, right? So I don't want to have a blanket where it's like every single time there's a big age gap, that means that there is a problem. But on the other hand, you have to also acknowledge that in society, there is this fetishization of younger women that a lot of guys sort of play into. And then that does also exist. So there's this strange kind of like, each individual sort of like relationship, some seem more valid than others, and you kind of have to like see all the context and what's going on there. So yeah, this came up with Zach Braff and I can never say her last name, Florence Pugh. Like they had a big age gap, and there was all this stuff about it. But they seem fine. Like they're no longer together, but they still work together, and it was fine, and they're friends, and they seem fine. And so like you can't always just assume based on just the age gap, and that's what makes things a bit tricky. Because then guys will also hide behind that. They'll hide behind that, like, well, she's an adult. It's like, okay, but in your case in particular, I'm getting creeper vibes. So you never know.
Yeah.
But that's not always true. But this guy, the way the whole thing started does give creeper vibes.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they met and circumstances had them together all the time for work or whatever, and then slowly this thing developed. No, he like cruised in.
Yeah, it's that first comment. At
Yeah.
least you didn't insult me. It just sets the scene for the rest of his behavior.
Yeah.
Don't be that guy.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So, Gerald, what are we reading next week?
Next week for our 250th episode,
Whoa.
I'll have you know. It is called Chicken Flavoured and Lemon Scented by Catherine Heiny, H-E-I-N-Y, which I'm pronouncing Heiny.
I hope so. Could be Haney. Could be Haney.
I saw her. I found a YouTube thing, and I saw her introduced as Heiny, so she
I hope
or
so.
sort of Heiny or something. But anyway, whatever.
Okay. But before you go, tell us how you'd ghostwrite your friend's breakup text in our Facebook discussion group, the Literary Roadhouse Readers. And the ultimate way to screen for potential partners is to select from the pool of Literary Roadhouse readers. Expand the dating pool by helping us expand our reach by leaving a review wherever you get your podcast, and consider supporting us financially on patreon.com/Literary Roadhouse. Every bit helps. Someone recently gave something. Richard Dennis, thank you so much. He's a longtime listener. He's been in comments and stuff. Okay. As always, share this podcast with the imaginary boyfriend who is mocking your ex in your head. Until next time, read a good story.
Yay.
Yay.